Welcome, curious minds, to AI History of Western Philosophy. Today, we're embarking on a really fascinating journey back to 5th century BCE Athens. We're going to explore a figure who's, well, as pivotal as he is enigmatic, Antiphon. His ideas on nature, law, justice, they were so radical, so transformative for his time. They actually continue to echo through philosophical discourse even today.
They really do.
But as we navigate his world, we'll hit this really fascinating challenge. Scholars call it the Antiphon Problem.
Nice, the problem.
Yeah, it's a historical puzzle about his very identity, and it profoundly shapes how we understand his, well, groundbreaking philosophy. So we'll be navigating this complexity, teasing out some surprising insights about what it meant to live and think and challenge the status quo in ancient Athens. Before we dive in, though, a crucial disclaimer. AI-generated content, specifically this podcast, confabulates. It presents ideas as fact. Though our subject is philosophy, we are not philosophers. AI History of Western Philosophy's mission, beyond pointing you to the original sources, is to experiment with philosophy as material and generate new possibilities for thought.
That's a key point. And Antiphon's era, it really was a crucible, wasn't it? In every sense, Athens was just brimming with intellectual and political ferment, a place where ideas, radical as they were, didn't just appear out of nowhere. They were a direct response to, and also a shaping force within, that incredibly dynamic environment.
Right.
And it's important to remember, we mainly get Antiphon's work through fragments, little snippets of papyrus, references from later authors, often filtered through their own views.
Yeah, that makes it tricky.
It does. It makes reconstructing his full philosophy a kind of fascinating detective story. High stakes, even. Every piece, however small, offers this tantalizing clue to a much bigger, often hidden picture.
Absolutely. And that's our mission today, essentially. We're going to transport ourselves into Antiphon's world, trying to meticulously unravel this Antiphon problem. We'll delve into his absolutely radical critique of law and society. And then, maybe most fascinatingly, explore how his incredibly diverse pursuits, from mathematics to what we might now call early psychology, how they all seem to coalesce into this coherent and, frankly, deeply subversive philosophical vision.
That's quite something, isn't it? How one person could engage with so much.
Yeah, weaving it all together. Okay, let's unpack this. So let's set the scene. Picture yourself stepping into Athens, maybe somewhere between 480 and 411 BCE. This wasn't just any old city-state. It was this sprawling, vibrant metropolis. A global superpower, really, at the peak of its influence, but at the same time kind of hurtling towards this period of harrowing decline.
Right, a real paradox.
Exactly. This era, it's bracketed by the huge threat of the Persian Wars, conflicts Athens somehow triumphed in, emerging as the big naval power.
Which led straight to the empire.
Straight to it. The Delian League morphs into this formidable Athenian empire, treasury bursting with tribute, the Acropolis, the Parthenon we still marvel at, all funded by this massive wealth.
A golden age, but a fragile one.
Very fragile, because it gets cut short by that long, ruinous Peloponnesian War against Sparta, tore the Greek world apart for decades, ended in Athens' defeat, collapse of the empire.
Devastating.
So you've got the city that's the military and commercial powerhouse, the cultural hub, magnet for artists, thinkers, but also simmering with instability, constant political strife. It's electric, but dangerous.
And underpinning all this turbulence, all this dynamism, was the radical Athenian democracy, democratia. But it wasn't democracy like we think of it today, with representatives and all that.
No, much more direct.
Way more direct. It was this almost unparalleled system of participatory governance. Political power was truly vested in the entire body of adult male citizens. They were actively shaping the city's destiny. A level of involvement that's, well, almost unimaginable now.
Except it wasn't always stable, was it? Weren't there coups?
Oh, yes. Crucially, this democratic system, while incredibly empowering for citizens, was briefly interrupted by oligarchic coups. And here's the striking irony. Antiphon himself was a key architect of one of those anti-democratic movements in 411 BCE.
Wow. Okay.
So the machinery of this democracy, it operated through key institutions. You had the assembly, the ecclesia, that was the heart of it all. Open to all adult male citizens, the sovereign body. Thousands gathering on the penics, debating, making decisions with immediate force of law.
Direct democracy in action.
Absolutely. Then you had the Council of 500, the BOO, members chosen by lot, managing daily affairs, preparing legislation for the assembly. And here's what's really critical for understanding Antiphon's world. Most public offices were filled by lot, not elections.
By lot, seriously.
Yes. It profoundly emphasized citizen equality. The idea that any citizen, regardless of wealth or background, even the poorest, the thetes, was equally capable, equally entitled to participate directly in governing. It was built on this idea that every citizen had a voice, a role, a civic duty, really, not just a right.
And okay, here's where it gets really interesting for Antiphon's career, right?
Right.
This direct democracy, it kind of created this, well, intensely litigious society.
It absolutely did. Think about it.
You've got these popular courts, the dicastries, juries of hundreds, maybe thousands of citizens, and the kicker, totally foreign to us. Individuals had to prosecute their own cases, deliver their own defenses, no lawyers speaking for you.
Imagine the pressure.
Right. Standing before hundreds of your peers, your reputation, property, freedom on the line, and everything depends on your ability to persuade them with your own words.
Your rhetorical skill wasn't just nice to have, it was vital.
Existential, almost. If you couldn't argue well, you could lose everything.
In this unique dynamic, it created the perfect conditions for a new kind of professional. Someone like Antiphon. Precisely. And that's where Antiphon's role as a logographist, a professional speechwriter, comes sharply into focus. These guys compose sophisticated, persuasive legal arguments for clients. Arguments carefully crafted, memorized, then delivered in court as if they were the client's own words.
Ghostwriting for the courtroom.
Essentially, yes. And the stakes were incredibly high. The fate of the accused, the accuser's reputation, even the city's political stability could hang on a trial's outcome. Given the direct participation needed and the sheer number of citizen judges, the skill of a logographist like Antiphon wasn't just helpful, it was often absolutely necessary to navigate that legal landscape.
Rhetoric as a weapon, almost.
A powerful instrument for survival and influence, definitely.
But this era wasn't just politically charged. It was also having this massive intellectual revolution. Athens, with its wealth, its dynamism, its openness, it became this irresistible magnet for a new class of professional educators, intellectuals, the Sophists.
The big names.
Yeah, figures like Protagoras, Gorgias, Hippias. They traveled the Greek world, teaching rhetoric, ethics, you name it, for a fee. But Athens was where the real action was, the most eager audience.
And they weren't like a school.
Right.
Not a unified group.
Exactly. Not a unified philosophical school like the Platonists or Stoics later. They were highly individualistic thinkers, often brilliant performers, captivating audiences, basically competing and displaying Sophia, wisdom.
Intellectual showmanship.
Kind of, yeah. Each had their own approach, their own specialties.
What did unite them, though, was this shared rationalistic spirit and a big shift in focus. Earlier thinkers, the pre-Socratics, were asking huge cosmological questions: what's the universe made of?
Right, the big picture stuff.
The Sophists turned that gaze inward, towards human affairs, ethics, politics, how we know what we know, epistemology, and above all, the power of logos, speech, language, argument.
Masters of rhetoric.
Absolutely. Dedicated to teaching persuasive speaking, often emphasizing that technique of arguing both sides of a question de soi logoi, a skill that was incredibly valuable, indispensable almost, in the assembly debates, and especially in those crowded, high-stakes law courts we mentioned.
And this intellectual revolution, it brought this profound, often deeply unsettling critique of traditional values. The Sophists weren't afraid to challenge beliefs about the gods, morality, and crucially for us today, the very basis of law itself.
Which must have ruffled some feathers.
Oh, definitely. They famously introduced and popularized this philosophical distinction that became the central framework for the big ethical and political questions of the age. The antithesis between nomos, meaning law, custom, convention, and physis, meaning nature.
Nomos and physis, that's the key.
That's the absolute key. This distinction, it's indispensable for understanding Antiphon's whole project, the lens he used. And for him, as we'll see, these weren't just different, they were often in direct opposition.
And this intellectual ferment, it created this deep, abiding tension in Athens. On one hand, the democracy itself, with its need for participation in the assembly and courts, it fueled the demand for sophistic skills. Rhetoric was power.
So the Sophists benefited from democracy?
Directly. They were in high demand, paid well, admired for their intellectual agility. Yet at the same time, the very critical rationalism they used, questioning laws, dissecting morality, suggesting justice might just be convention.
That was seen as dangerous.
By many conservatives, yes.
Yeah.
As a corrosive force, threatening the social order, the polis, traditional values. And this paradox, it's perfectly embodied in Antiphon.
How so?
Well, here's a man who is a master of the democratic legal arts, the logographinos, helping citizens in court. And simultaneously, he's a philosopher whose ideas radically undermine the legitimacy of conventional law. And it all culminates in him leading that anti-democratic revolution in 411 BCE.
Master practitioner and radical critic, all in one.
Exactly. His complexity is remarkable, a living contradiction almost.
Okay, so let's dive into what scholars affectionately call the Antiphon Problem. This isn't just some dusty academic thing. It's the core puzzle that makes studying him so fascinating and, well, a bit complicated.
It really is central.
The main question: was Antiphon of Romnus, the guy we know as the orator, the speechwriter, the leader of that oligarchic coup in 411, was he the same person as Antiphon the Sophist, the author of those incredibly radical philosophical works like On Truth and Unconquered?
One Antiphon or two.
Exactly. And this isn't a modern invention, this confusion. It goes way back to antiquity. Biographical details for different antiphons got, as one scholar put it, hopelessly muddled by the 1st or 2nd century CE.
And there are others named Antiphon too.
Yeah, just to add to the fun, there was Antiphon, the tragic poet of Syracuse. So trying to figure out who we're talking about and whether these profound works came from one mind or two, it's been a historical detective story for ages.
That's right. And for a long time, the separatist view was quite strong, argued forcefully in modern times by Gerard Pendrick. It maintained that Antiphon the orator and Antiphon the sophist were different people.
What was their reasoning?
Well, several key arguments. First, this perceived ideological incompatibility. The author of On Truth expresses these ideas that seem strongly egalitarian, libertarian even.
Which clashes with the oligarch.
Exactly. It seemed fundamentally at odds with the known anti-democratic oligarchic politics of Antiphon of Romnus, the orator. How could the same guy argue for natural equality and then lead a coup to restrict power? The gap seemed too wide. Second, the separatists pointed to specific ancient texts, especially Xenophon's Memorabilia. Xenophon refers to Socrates' rival as Antiphon the Sophist.
Suggesting a distinction.
That was the argument. Why add the sophist unless you needed to distinguish him from the more famous orator? And finally, some ancient critics, like Hermogenes centuries later, noted stylistic differences between the speeches and the philosophy.
Different writing styles.
Yeah. The court's speeches seemed direct, practical. The philosophical works, especially on truth, more abstract, theoretical, maybe even poetic. So, based on style, they attributed them to different authors.
Okay, so those are pretty compelling arguments for two antiphons. But what does that mean for us understanding him today? Well, it turns out, in recent decades, scholarly consensus has mostly shifted the other way, towards the Unitarian view.
The one Antiphon theory.
Right. Championed by scholars like Michael Gagarin, Andre Lex, Glenn Most. It holds there was just one major intellectual figure named Antiphon in 5th century Athens.
And the arguments for this view are actually quite compelling, too. It forces us to rethink what kind of thinker Antiphon really was. Indeed, the arguments for the Unitarian view are strong. The main one is sort of an argument from silence combined with prominence. Antiphon of Romnus, the orator, he was exceptionally well known, hugely influential. Thucydides himself praises him effusively, calls him one of the ablest Athenians of his time, incredible intellect.
So if there was another major thinker with the same name?
Unitarians argue contemporaries like Thucydides, Xenophon, Plato, would have needed to distinguish them much more clearly, much more often than they actually did. The lack of consistent, clear distinction strongly suggests they were talking about the same person. Also, if you look closely at the whole ancient tradition, it's overwhelmingly Unitarian. The doubts about one Antiphon. They only popped up relatively late and were based mostly on those stylistic criteria we mentioned.
Which aren't always reliable.
Exactly. Style varies hugely with genre, audience, purpose. A legal speech just sounds different from a philosophical treatise. And folks like Harpocration, the 2nd century CE lexicographer who had access to lost works, he clearly assumed a single author for everything. It suggests the idea of multiple antiphons wasn't widely held by those closest to the sources. But maybe the most important point, when you view the whole corpus speeches and philosophical fragments as the work of one person, it reveals this profoundly thematically coherent, maybe complex, but coherent intellectual project.
Themes connect across the different works.
Absolutely. Across all these writings, there's this sustained engagement with the nature of law, justice, truth, the power of logos, that core tension between nomos and physis. It's not just an on-truth. It subtly informs the arguments he crafts for clients in court, even if it's implicit.
Interesting.
So it suggests that the diverse roles, logographer, political advisor, philosopher, mathematician, dream interpreter, they don't point to multiple people. They point to a single incredibly wide-ranging mind, a polymath tackling the diverse interests of his day. This utilitarian view gives us arguably the most historically plausible and philosophically rich picture of him.
And understanding this debate, it goes way beyond just biography, doesn't it? It actually helps us view intellectual life in 5th century Athens differently. You know, our modern tendency is to put people in boxes. Philosopher, politician, rhetorician.
We impose our categories backwards.
Exactly. The separatist view kind of relies on those distinctions. It struggles to reconcile the abstract thinker with the political operator. But the Unitarian position forces us to confront someone who embodies all these roles at once.
Which is probably more historically accurate for that period.
Right. It reflects a time when intellectuals were expected to engage with the polis across multiple domains. Accepting one antiphon gives us a more authentic model of a public intellectual in the age of Socrates embedded in the city's affairs, yet capable of profound abstraction.
It challenges our need categories, demands a more holistic view.
Okay, let's get into the real core of Antiphon's philosophy now. The surviving fragments of his treatise on truth, Peri Eletheus. This work contains, arguably, one of the most radical, most uncompromising takes on that physis versus nomos antithesis in all of Greek thought.
It really is stark.
For Antiphon, these two, they aren't complementary, they don't work together at all, they're in stark fundamental opposition.
He's drawing a battle line, not seeking harmony. That's precisely it. He draws the line with almost surgical precision. Physis, nature, for him that's the realm of objective truth, aletheia. Necessity, inherent freedom. Its dictates are universal, inescapable, and fundamentally geared towards the individual's flourishing.
And what is that core dictate?
The core law of nature, for Antiphon, is the relentless pursuit of one's own advantage, which he identifies pretty directly with the hedonistic goal of seeking pleasure and, even more fundamentally, avoiding pain and harm.
So self-interest is natural.
It's an instinctual drive, a biological imperative, according to him. Nomos, on the other hand, that's all human laws, customs, traditions, social conventions. Antiphon dismisses it, calls it artificial, contingent, and fundamentally inimical to nature, hostile to it.
Wow. Hostile.
Yeah. Where nature's demands are necessary, intrinsic, the demands of human laws are just imposed by human agreement, by convention, by artifice. He illustrates this vividly. He says, law dictates for the eyes what they should see and what they should not see, for the ears what they should hear, they should not hear, and so on.
So law restricts our senses, our instincts.
Exactly. By doing so, nomos actively represses natural human spontaneity, our innate desires, our uninhibited pursuit of self-interest. It's like a societal straitjacket on our natural instincts. Think of a child's freedom versus all the rules adults impose. Antiphon's saying all society's rules are fundamentally alien to our true selves.
And to really hammer home this idea that nature, physis, is more fundamental, more real than human convention, he uses this really powerful thought experiment, the argument of the buried bed.
Ah, the bed, yeah.
He says, imagine burying a wooden bed, a totally artificial man-made object governed by nomos. If that rotting wood somehow regained life, what would happen?
It wouldn't grow into another bed.
Right. He says it would sprout into a tree, its true natural form, physis reasserting itself.
It's a powerful metaphor.
It really is. It suggests all human artifice, all our social order, our nomos. It's just this superficial, temporary layer over a more fundamental, enduring natural reality.
Human laws are fragile against the persistence of nature. And building on this stark contrast, Antiphon launches this truly devastating critique of conventional justice. It's a cornerstone of what scholars call the immoralist challenge.
How does he define justice?
Quite simply, justice is just adherence to the laws and customs, nomima, of your city, whatever the rules happen to be. But since he's already established these rules are artificial, often contrary to nature's demand to avoid pain and seek advantage,
Sure.
he then asks, what's the practical value of being just?
Okay, and his answer?
Utterly provocative. He argues obeying the law is advantageous only when you're being watched, when there are witnesses.
Only when you might get caught.
Precisely. The punishments of nomos are external. They depend entirely on being caught, prosecuted, convicted. If you transgress and get away with it, undetected, then there's no penalty, and so from a purely self-interested view, no disadvantage. Contrast that with the laws of physis. They are totally self-enforcing. If you act against nature, say, choose pain when a painless option exists, or damage your own health, you suffer an immediate necessary penalty. Doesn't matter if anyone sees.
What's touching a hot stove?
Exactly. The burn is immediate, inevitable. No witness is needed. But if you seal bread and no one sees, you get the bread, no punishment. This distinction is crucial. He's asking, If you can escape the consequences of nomos, why would you ever choose the disadvantageous path of conventional justice?
And this whole framework, it establishes a pretty clear, if maybe unsettling, form of rational egoism.
Mhm.
The intelligent individual, Antiphon implies, should prioritize nature's dictates their own self-interest, seeking pleasure, avoiding pain over the dictates of law and justice whenever there's a conflict, and crucially, whenever they think they can avoid getting caught.
It's a stark conclusion.
It is. And it's a direct, incredibly powerful precursor to those challenges in Plato's dialogues, right?
Absolutely. Especially the sophistical or immoralist viewpoints.
Like Thrasymachus in Republic Book 1, justice is just the advantage of the stronger.
Exactly that. Or Glaucon in Book 2, arguing the perfectly unjust life, if you can get away with it, is far more profitable, more desirable than the just one.
So Antiphon was laying the groundwork for these huge questions way before Plato.
He really was. He was posing these uncomfortable challenges that would echo through Western ethics. Basically saying, if you're smart, be unjust when you can get away with it. But maybe the most revolutionary, the most subversive element of Antiphon's philosophy, it comes from this remarkable papyrus fragment from On Truth, where he argues for the natural equality of all human beings.
Equality. In 5th century Athens, that sounds radical.
It was astounding, a bombshell in a world built on deep-seated hierarchies. Athenian society, like most of the ancient world, assumed the superiority of Greeks over non-Greeks, barbarians, assumed the superiority of free men over slaves, aristocrats over commoners. These were just unquestioned facts of life for most people.
And Antiphon challenged all that.
Head on. And he grounds his claim for equality not in some abstract moral ideal, which would have been revolutionary enough, but in the observable facts of physis, of nature itself.
Based on biology.
Essentially, yes. He asserts, by nature we all have the same nature in all particulars, barbarians and Greeks. And the proof, simple, empirical, biological. All humans share the same fundamental needs and functions. He says, for we all breathe out into the air by the mouth and the nose, and we all work with our hands, and we walk with our feet.
We're all biologically the same machine, basically.
That's the implication. So he concludes, all those distinctions, ethnicity, social status, honor, they're purely nomos, arbitrary convention. And by adhering to these artificial distinctions, he says, we have become like barbarians towards each other. We fail to see our shared humanity.
Wow. So upholding social divisions makes us the barbarians.
That's his stunning reversal.
Yeah.
By treating others as less based on these invented categories, we are the ones acting against nature.
And this argument, it's way more than just abstract philosophy, isn't it? It's a direct ideological assault on the political realities of his time.
Absolutely. Think about the Athenian Empire. Its power, its identity rested on this ideology of Greek superiority, justifying subjugating others, taking tribute.
Antiphon's argument pulls the rug out from under that.
Completely. And slavery, too, often defended by saying some people were slaves by nature. By grounding universal equality in physis, Antiphon systematically dismantles the conventional nomic justifications for imperialism, social hierarchy, slavery.
So On Truth wasn't just theory, it was a deeply subversive political text.
It had to be read that way, challenging the very legitimacy of the Athenian state and its core institutions.
Which brings us back to that incredible paradox.
Right, he's dismantling the ideological framework of his own society, even while working within it as a logographus and then leading an oligarchic coup.
The contradictions are just staggering. He's far more complex than any simple label. Okay, moving on, we hit another fascinating puzzle in Antiphon's works. Unconquered, perihomonoios. Because while On Truth gives us this profoundly radical critique of society, championing individual advantage, questioning law, the fragments of Unconquered seem, well, much more conventional.
They do strike a different tone.
Yeah, the surviving bits suggest this work actually defends the authority of the community as a safeguard against anarchy. It seems to recommend ideals like concord and self-restraint, both for communities and within individuals.
Which sounds like the exact opposite of On Truth.
Right. This apparent endorsement of social harmony, traditional virtues. It seems to clash so much with the egoistic individualism of On Truth. This is exactly what led some of those separatist scholars to doubt they could possibly be by the same author.
How do you reconcile them? It's a fair question. For Unitarian scholars, reconciling them requires a more nuanced look. Several possibilities get explored. One common idea. Maybe they were just for different audiences, different purposes.
Like one for the public, one for initiates.
Something like that. Unconquered might have been more popular, a pragmatic guide for social life, maybe for a broader audience. offering advice on how to function within existing structures. Whereas on truth could have been more specialized, philosophical, maybe for a smaller intellectual circle who could handle its radical implications without, immediately starting a riot. Another view suggests on truth's radicalism isn't necessarily a call for pure anarchy. Maybe it's more like a profound plea for legal reform.
Arguing laws should be changed to fit nature better.
Exactly. Arguing nomoi should be critically examined, revised to better align with the universal needs and dictates of physis. In that light, Unconquered could then be exploring the conditions for a better, more natural form of social organization, one that is aligned with nature's advantages.
So, Unconquered could be about creating a better nomos.
Possibly. Maybe it offered specific legal reforms to minimize conflict between individual desire and communal law. Or maybe propose governance systems that were less arbitrary, more beneficial overall. And of course, it's entirely possible his views just evolved over his career.
People change their minds.
Thinkers definitely do, especially adventurous ones like Antiphon. He might have explored different facets of the problem at different times. There's also a more philosophical way to reconcile them, one that links back nicely to On Truth. Maybe Conquered isn't primarily about political harmony between people.
What else could it be?
Maybe it's about achieving an internal psychological harmony within the individual. This Conquered would come from living truly in accordance with physis, which avoids the inner conflict, the distress, the psychological pain caused by society's unnatural, arbitrary demands.
So inner peace through following nature.
Right. If On Truth diagnoses the problem nomos causing inner turmoil, maybe Unconquered. Unconquered offers a guide to navigating that tension, perhaps cultivating a mindset that lets you thrive by following nature's dictates, while pragmatically avoiding nomos' penalties when you can. A guide to inner peace in a contradictory world.
What's really remarkable and what strengthens that Unitarian view for me is how wide-ranging his intellect was. It wasn't just politics or law. He also dove deep into mathematics. He's credited with an early, really important attempt to solve one of the great ancient geometry problems, squaring the circle.
The famous problem, constructing a square with the same area as a given circle, just using compass and straight edge.
And his method was pretty clever, wasn't it? A precursor to later techniques.
Very clever conceptually. It involved inscribing a regular polygon, say a square, inside a circle. Then he proposed successively doubling the number of sides squared to octagon, 16gon, 32gon, and so on, each time getting closer to the circle's edge.
Getting closer and closer.
Right. Antiphon believed this process would eventually cause the polygon's area to exhaust the circle's area, at which point the polygon's sides would, owing to their smallness, coincide with the circumference of the circle.
So the circle basically becomes a polygon.
That was his idea. And since any polygon, no matter how many sides, can be geometrically squared, he argued, so could the circle once it effectively became a polygon. Interestingly, Aristotle famously critiqued this method, but his critique wasn't really mathematical, like finding a calculation error.
It was philosophical.
Fundamentally philosophical. Aristotle argued it wasn't even the geometer's job to refute Antiphon, because Antiphon's basic premise, the idea that a straight line could ever truly coincide with a curve, even infinitesimally violated the fundamental principles, the axioms of geometry itself.
So it wasn't about the math working out, but about the underlying concepts.
Exactly. For Aristotle, geometry deals with idealized abstract forms, straight lines and curves, or distinct, irreducible categories. To suggest a straight line could merge with a curve was like saying a perfect circle could become a square. It misunderstood the nature of the mathematical entities. It implicitly destroyed the principle of infinite divisibility. So for Aristotle, Antiphon's approach was a category error, a philosophical misunderstanding of geometry, stepping outside proper mathematical proof.
And as if philosophy and math weren't enough, Antiphon also went into what we'd now call psychology.
Quite astonishingly, yes.
He apparently authored a treatise on the interpretation of dreams and another really intriguing work, supposedly called Art of Avoiding Grief, Techna Alypius.
The skill of avoiding pain or grief.
Yeah, and ancient sources like Pseudo-Plutarch even report he set up a kind of clinic, or maybe just a booth, near the Agora in Corinth, offering a unique form of verbal medicine.
Verbal medicine, like therapy.
Sounds like it. He claimed he could heal every suffering person by means of language, offering consolation and therapy to people afflicted by grief, distress, anxiety.
That's incredible for the 5th century BCE, one of the earliest known attempts at psychotherapy.
Imagine people coming to him, maybe after losing someone in the war or suffering some social disgrace. And Antiphon, the orator philosopher, listens, then offers this rational perspective.
Maybe saying your pain isn't from the gods, it's from misaligned expectations, from clinging to what nomos says you should feel.
Exactly. Maybe urging them to rationally detach from conventional losses, see them as artificial wounds from societal expectations, not natural misfortunes.
And his approach to dreams was similar. Rationalistic.
Apparently so. Taught people to dismiss fears, viewed divination as just a wise man's guess.
Which fits perfectly with the broader sophistic critique of superstition, always bringing it back to human reason. It's truly fascinating how these seemingly separate pursuits, radical politics, math, early psychotherapy, can actually be seen as interconnected parts of a single, unified philosophical project.
How do they all tie together?
Well, the central principle of On Truth is that life's goal is to follow physis, maximize advantage, minimize pain. Antiphon's art of avoiding grief, that's a direct, practical application. It's a techna, a skill for minimizing psychological pain, using rational logos.
Using reason to align yourself with nature and suffer less.
Precisely. Teaching you how to align your inner self with nature, to reduce suffering from external gnomic pressures. Even his math, squaring the circle. You can view it through this lens. The polygon is the artificial construct, representing nomos, the human attempt to impose order. The circle is the perfect natural form representing physis, the ideal continuous reality.
So it's a philosophical exploration of the relationship between convention and nature.
You could see it that way, exploring the limits of human convention in trying to capture nature. And even the seemingly conventional unconquered fits in. Maybe it's a pragmatic investigation to the least painful way to exist within society's necessary, but often unnatural, constraints.
Finding a workable nomos that minimizes the pain caused by its clash with physis. Exactly. So whether he's doing political theory, psychotherapy, or geometry, Antiphon's work consistently explores that fundamental tension, the artificial world of human convention versus the true, advantageous reality of nature. It all fits together surprisingly well as this overarching project about human existence and flourishing in a complex world.
So reflecting on Antiphon's whole body of work, it's clear he holds this pivotal, if maybe paradoxical, place in history, both in rhetoric and philosophy. As a practical guy, he's recognized as the first of the 10 Attic orators, that canonical list of the greatest Athenian speechwriters.
Founder, really.
Yeah, he essentially founded forensic oratory as a real profession, pioneer in logographia, writing those speeches for clients, his surviving court speeches, and his tetralogies, those amazing hypothetical legal exercises.
Case, countercase, prosecution, defense. Brilliant structure.
Totally. They're seminal works in developing rhetorical theory, legal argument. He practically invented sophisticated legal analysis, dissecting arguments with a precision that influenced countless others. And at the same time, as a philosopher, he stands as one of the most radical thinkers of the Sophistic movement. His stark nomos versus physis opposition puts him right in the middle of critical debates with his contemporaries, defines a crucial battleground.
Unlike someone like Protagoras.
Right. Protagoras, at least in Plato's telling, saw nomos as beneficial, necessary for civilization. Antiphon saw it as external, often hostile, a constraint, a source of pain, an impediment to natural advantage. And more significantly, his formulation of that immoralist challenge.
The idea that it's better to be unjust if you can get away with it.
Exactly. That makes him a crucial, often unstated antagonist for Plato.
Plato was arguing against him.
You could say the entire ethical and political project of Plato's Republic, especially demonstrating that the just life is truly better for the individual, is like this monumental attempt to refute the Antiphontic and Thrasymacheian claim that the life of injustice is, by nature, better. Plato was definitely wrestling with Antiphon's ghost.
Even Aristotle engaged with him.
Directly. Critiqued his math for squaring the circle, and his materialistic view of nature in the buried bed argument. So Antiphon's influence stretched across the intellectual giants of his time, shaping the very questions they felt they had to answer.
And because his thought mostly survives in these tantalizing fragments, the sheer radicalness of his ideas has invited all sorts of modern interpretations. People try to fit him into later political or ethical boxes.
It's tempting, given how provocative he is.
Like some scholars see him as a kind of proto-anarchist.
You can see why.
Yeah, his critique of law, nomos, as this artificial coercive institution hostile to nature imposed on freedom, that resonates strongly with anarchist critiques of the state. Saying law's demands are merely imposed That sounds like a foundational anarchist sentiment, doesn't it? A cry against external authority.
It does have that ring. But while he provides this powerful critique, his surviving work doesn't really offer a positive theory of a stateless society or an alternative organization.
So, the proto-anarchist label hints at his spirit, but maybe it's incomplete. He showed what not to do, but not necessarily what to do instead.
Perhaps it captures part of him, but maybe not the whole picture. Another interpretation pegs his ethics as a form of utilitarian egoism.
Meaning?
Well, his ethics are definitely a form of consequentialism, judging actions by their outcomes. And since the desired outcome is the advantage of the individual agent maximizing pleasure, avoiding pain, you can classify it as ethical egoism or egoistic hedonism.
Which sounds a bit like utilitarianism.
It's a clear precursor in its focus on consequences and well-being, but it differs critically from classical utilitarianism, Bentham, Mill. Their focus was impartiality, maximizing the general good, the greatest happiness for the greatest number.
Whereas Antiphon is all about the individual's good.
Always the individual's advantage. That's his primary focus. Makes him a fascinating, if maybe problematic, figure in the history of consequentialist ethics. But maybe his most enduring legacy, certainly one of the most powerful modern readings, is his role as a foundational figure for natural law and natural rights.
How so?
By appealing to physis, nature, as this universal unwritten standard that stands above positive laws, nomoi, and can be used to critically judge the laws of any society. He lays the groundwork for all later natural law theory.
The idea that there are inherent rights, moral standards beyond human laws.
Exactly. Discernible through reason, independent of legislation. And his argument for the natural equality of all humans regardless of ethnicity, class, legal status, it's a particularly clear, powerful, early articulation of a concept central to universal human rights theories.
Like influencing Locke and the Enlightenment later.
You can draw a clear line to declare all humans, Greek or barbarian, naturally equal in the 5th century BCE. That was a revolutionary spark. A profound idea still resonating in our talks about human dignity and universal rights today.
So as we wrap up, Antiphon of Athens really emerges from these fragments as just this figure of profound complexity, even contradiction.
He really does defy easy labels.
Yeah, think about it. An oligarchic conspirator who simultaneously argued for a philosophy of universal human equality that undercut his own society's foundations. A master of legal rhetoric, the first prose speechwriter, yet he argued law itself was unnatural, often disadvantageous.
The ultimate insider critiquing the system from within.
Exactly. A political pragmatist advising litigants, leading a coup, but whose ideas held the seeds of this radical anarchism challenging political authority itself. He just embodies the intellectual ferment and deep tensions of his age.
Indeed. And that Antiphon problem, plus the fragmentary evidence, means he'll always remain partly enigmatic, forever prompting debate, inviting new interpretations. But what we do have is more than enough to establish him as one of the most original, most challenging thinkers of the 5th century BCE.
His critique still bites.
Absolutely. His incisive critique of convention, his pioneering work in math and psychology, that radical vision of a common human nature, it all continues to provoke and inspire. He secures his place as this crucial, if maybe sometimes overlooked, voice in Western philosophy. His work is a powerful testament to his era's ferment and to those enduring questions about the individual, society, and nature.
Questions still relevant today. So what does this all mean for you listening in? Antiphon's work really forces us to constantly question what is truly natural, what's merely conventional, and where real justice lies. His ideas are this powerful reminder that our societies, our laws, our ethics, they're often built on agreements we rarely scrutinize. Agreements that, through Antiphon's lens, might actually be working against our natural advantage and well-being. He challenges us to look beyond the accepted norms. And here's maybe a final thought for you to ponder. To live according to nature, like Antiphon suggests. Well, that might mean dismantling a lot of the world we've built on convention, on nomos. What parts of our nomos are social rules, legal structures, cultural expectations would you be most willing to shed if it meant aligning more closely with your physis, your true nature, your self-interest?
It's a challenging question.
It is. How much of what we accept as just is simply shared agreement? And how much is truly universal, truly beneficial to our nature? Thank you for joining us on this AI history of Western philosophy. We really hope this deep dive into Antiphon's radical world has been as thought-provoking for you as it has been for us.
He certainly gives you a lot to think about.
He does. If you enjoyed the episode, found it thought-provoking, please do consider liking, subscribing, or maybe leaving a comment with your own reflections on Antiphon's ideas. We genuinely love hearing from you and engaging with your thoughts. Join us next time as we continue our exploration of the fascinating minds that shaped Western thought.